Hi there, this is James Swanwick, and you're listening to the Alcohol Free Lifestyle Podcast, where you learn how to take back control over alcohol and live a life of health, wealth, love, and happiness.
In January 2020, I attended my first meeting that I was going to try and support myself to stay alcohol free. I'd been in a 2-week inpatient rehab clinic in October of 2019, and I'd reached a stage where I just felt like I needed a little bit more support. I didn't know where to go, but there was some meetings locally and I thought I'd give them a try. Needless to say, I was pretty nervous. I didn't know if I would fit in. I didn't know who I was going to meet there. But I do remember feeling quite excited about the possibility of being able to talk about what it was like to be alcohol free. And at the time, I was still riding high on this wave of freedom that I'd found now that I didn't feel like I needed to drink anymore. I arrived at the meeting and was met by some really happy, friendly people, and everything was going really, really well. I thought, this is great. Everybody seems upbeat and fun, and it wasn't a dark, dingy room. It was actually a really nice room, and the light was coming in, and everybody was making teas and coffees, and then we sat down and went round the circle. And as I quickly realised, the requirement was to say that I was an alcoholic. Before it got to be my turn, a man about 4 seats ahead of me said, "I don't identify as an alcoholic, but I'm here to see what this is all about." There was a rather uncomfortable silence in the room, and the person that was leading the group then explained to the group that in order to be here, we had to say that we were alcoholics. I was pretty vulnerable at the time, and so I complied. And when it got to be my turn, I said the thing that I'd been dreading to ever have to say, which was, my name is Sarah and I'm an alcoholic. And even as I said the words, I felt sick inside. It just didn't feel quite right. In this episode, I'm going to talk about that word, the word alcoholic. I'm not here to demonize any particular method or support groups for giving up alcohol. I think all of them have their place, and many of them are helping thousands and thousands of people. But what I do want to talk about is the word alcoholic and how it can create a massive deterrent for people who really need and want to find help. When I think about an alcoholic, my mind still goes back to visual pictures from when I was really, really young. Pictures in my mind, I don't know where they came from, but generally someone lying on a park bench with a bottle in a brown paper bag lying next to them on the floor. They're usually passed out, homeless, dirty, just completely the image of everything that I would never imagine that I would be. And I still have those really strong memories and pictures in my mind. So when I started to realise that alcohol was a problem for me, meaning that I was drinking too much for myself and that my life was starting to become a little bit unmanageable as a result of my drinking, I was really petrified that I was an alcoholic. I didn't question at the time what that actually meant. I just thought that you either were or you weren't, and there was a line in the sand, and at some point you would tip over into the category that would be classed as an alcoholic. Because of all the negative connotations and beliefs that I had around that term, I was really deterred from trying to find help. And the thought that somebody would actually call me an alcoholic was horrifying to me. on so many levels, probably very subconsciously as well as consciously. So now, for 4 years on, being alcohol free and realizing how much damage that term does to people, working with people and seeing the shame and the fear that surrounds this word, I wanted to explore this term and really emphasize the need for us to consider whether that term should be eradicated completely. I think it should, in case you hadn't guessed. But I'm going to talk about it because it has massive implications in our society. The term alcoholic is hugely, in my opinion, outdated. I don't see it as being helpful to anyone in any way. But what I do see is that it can cause a lot of harm. It can cause people to feel that they are not bad enough to seek help, or that if they do seek help, they are going to be placed in this category of people suffering with this undiagnosable condition, but one that has massive implications in terms of the stigma and shame that it carries with it. So, where did this term originate? Well, according to the online etymology dictionary, it was the 1790s where alcohol plus ic equaled of or pertaining to alcohol. By the 1870s, that had transformed into the meaning caused by drunkenness, and by 1910 into habitually drunk. So in terms of the adjective, that's what alcoholic meant. When it came to the noun, I am, or one who is an alcoholic, the 1891 was when it was recorded that one who is addicted to drinking in excess, a chronic drunkard, old rounder. Not quite sure what an old rounder is. But we're looking at that basically in the early 20th century, the term alcoholic started to appear. But our understanding of alcohol use disorder, as it's now more preferably termed, has evolved significantly since those times. The problem is that the word alcoholic is still lingering around and carrying with it a significant burden of shame. One could say that the term alcoholic implies some kind of moral failing. And this is particularly challenging for people who are in that grey area of having problems with their alcohol consumption, where it's not bad enough that they are really significant negative things are happening in their lives. However, it is impacting them negatively, and they're not quite sure where they fit in terms of trying to find support. People who are struggling with alcohol consumption at whatever level cannot be classified with one term. It is not a one-size-fits-all. The alcoholic term tries to simplify an incredibly complicated issue, because people with an alcohol use disorder run the gamut. It's a spectrum of people, from somebody who is drinking 2 glasses of wine a week but still finding that problematic, to somebody that might be drinking a bottle of wine an evening. There is no line in the sand that tells you whether or not you are an alcoholic, which is why we revert to that stereotypical idea, and then we can say to ourselves, well, I'm not that bad. I believe that there is a vast number of people who are quite significantly deterred from seeking support because they don't feel like they qualify. But we must be really clear that there is no one size fits all. There is no blanket term It's an oversimplification of an incredibly complex issue. And people who are struggling with alcohol all deserve a level of care. Some may need more intervention and support than others, but it doesn't mean that if you're not drinking yourself into oblivion every day, that you don't deserve to be getting some support. Alcoholism or alcohol use disorder is now widely recognized as a medical condition. It is not a moral failing, which again can be implied by the term alcoholic. It's a medical condition that is dependent on a variety of different factors: psychological, physical, genetic, social, spiritual. So its nature is multifaceted. We need to be conscious of this and more educated about this so that we don't try and cram everybody in to this one-size-fits-all box of individuals who cannot drink responsibly. When we do this, what we're essentially doing, aside from providing a very strong deterrent for people to seek support, is we're also reducing the accountability of society and of the alcohol industry. When we label someone as an alcoholic, it's almost like we absolve society and the individuals from their shared responsibility to address the problem. We're using outdated language, and by doing so, inadvertently excusing the obligation to promote things like responsible drinking and providing better resources for people that need them. And what about hope and motivation? When I was stuck in the on again, off again cycle of drinking, I had very little hope that I would ever be able to extract myself from this cycle. I was also really unmotivated to find help because of all this stigma and shame surrounding alcoholics, and also all the messaging through the media and all the glamorization of all these wonderful, amazing human beings that could drink this toxic poison responsibly. So many layers of old beliefs and shame and stigma wrapped up in this one word. And so I think we also need to pay attention to the fact that this word can be very demotivating by undermining our sense of hope. The term alcoholic often carries with it this sense of permanence, that you are forever doomed to living this life in a society where there's all these wonderful, normal, moderate drinkers that are responsibly drinking everywhere, and you have to stand on the sidelines watching them as this flawed, failed human being that was unable to find the magic set point of your consumption so that you didn't become in any way dependent on it. I want to really emphasize the absolute BS on this. It is hard enough to struggle with an addictive substance, never mind adding on to that the layers and layers of shame and guilt and embarrassment that can go with it when we are using outdated language that is not based on anything other than some old terms that have not been re-looked at or readdressed for a very long time. So to summarize, we have stigma and shame. The term alcoholic carries with it a really heavy burden of both of those things and more. It implies a moral failing. It's a one-size-fits-all, which is really not the case. There is a massive spectrum of people that are struggling with their drinking for whatever reason. We now understand more about the alcohol use disorder spectrum. We understand more about the science. We know that it's not a moral failing, so we need to start updating our language. It can reduce our accountability as a society to really look at this problem in the scale at which it exists in reality. It's not a small bunch of people sitting on a park bench with a bottle of vodka. There are so many people, from the most educated professionals down to young kids, who are consuming this toxic substance and believing that because they are not the stereotypical alcoholic, they can keep going. We also have people who are really struggling but are too afraid to seek help because of this very stigmatized term. So, what can we do to address this problem? Well, I believe that we really need to replace the word altogether. We need to be using more compassionate and accurate language instead of these stigmatizing labels. Terms like somebody with an alcohol use disorder is better than an alcoholic. It's not ideal. I think it's something like somebody who has a problem with alcohol, which would be probably 90% of the people that drink it. I'm just saying. But these terms, these blanket terms, are really not helpful. So we can use things like alcohol use disorder. We can use things like an individual experiencing alcohol-related problems. These acknowledge the complexity of the issue, and they also encourage more understanding and empathy. I also believe we need to promote more and more a culture of support and understanding, and environments where people feel not only safe but also feel like they can relate to the people that they're recovering with, but also the people that they are being helped by. More and more people are stepping into roles with lived experience, high education, successful, highly functioning individuals who are stepping up and saying, I can now openly say that I had a problem with this highly toxic, addictive substance, and therefore giving other people permission to do the same. Historically, I believe that many of us, myself included, have been hiding and being shameful about this because of this term and these outdated language that we've been using. So it's not just about changing the language. Of course, it's also about changing our attitudes and actions and making this whole alcohol landscape less stigmatized, less judgmental, and more realistic. Because ultimately, we have all been drinking this highly toxic, addictive poison, some of us for 20, 30, 40 years of our lives, without any education about what it was doing to our brains, to our bodies, to our organs, and then really not understanding the impact of our consumption on the people around us. When we look at tobacco and smoking, there is this thing about secondhand smoke, and that's been one of the big reasons why we had to stop people smoking secondhand smoke. What about secondhand drinking? What about the anger, the abuse in the home, the car accidents? There's a multitude of things that happen in our society that are directly linked to alcohol consumption. However, we don't talk about that. We just blame the individual for not being able to control this substance. When you think about it from a common sense perspective, it really is quite ridiculous. Third, we must advocate for evidence-based treatment and support for mental health, because alcohol disorder is a treatable condition. Those who struggle with this problem all deserve to receive support and help. Oftentimes we are drinking to avoid mental health issues, so having that support to remove the alcohol first is so important before we really uncover and address what's going on and why people are turning to alcohol in the first place and losing their ability to control their intake. And we must really become more educated. We are living in a world where we have this information at our fingertips, but unfortunately, so many of us are at the stage where we actually don't perhaps want to know. In many ways, it's easier for us to think, well, I'm not an alcoholic, so I can keep on drinking. But we need to then ask the question, is it easier on our partners? Is it easier on our colleagues, on our kids? So my suggestion is that we get rid of this outdated term alcoholic, unless, of course, you personally find it helpful as a label. And of course, there's no judgment on that side. Some people may find that saying to themselves they're an alcoholic is motivating, but I would suggest that most people don't. This podcast really is for anybody out there who is struggling with the idea that they're drinking too much, but doesn't identify with what, as we've already established, is a highly outdated term. So I'll end by saying again, there is no such thing as an alcoholic, in my opinion and in reality, because it's not diagnosable. There are no specific benchmarks that qualify you as an alcoholic. And so I believe we should move beyond and past that term. Alcohol use disorder, problem drinking, whatever you want to call it, problem's a problem. We don't need to pigeonhole people, and we certainly don't need to stigmatize and judge people for falling into a trap that millions and millions of people are stuck in, believing that if they're not bad enough, if they're not an alcoholic, then they don't deserve to find help. They don't feel that they can bring themselves to get help, and we need to change that. My name's Sarah Connelly, and I'm a coach with the Alcohol Free Lifestyle. Thank you so much for joining me on my soapbox today, and I'll hopefully see you in another episode soon.
Hi, this is James Swanwick, and we're taking applications for our 90-day and 1-year stop drinking programs. Clients are mostly executives, entrepreneurs, and investors who have tried unsuccessfully and repeatedly to stop drinking but remain stuck in a frustrating cycle of stop-start, stop-start. Our programs are not AA, which has a reported 7% success rate. Our programs are not rehab, which has a reported 6% success rate. Our 90-day and 1-year programs involve a safe, fun, virtual community of high achievers with a process that boasts an incredible 92% success rate of clients reaching at least 90 consecutive days alcohol-free. We use the latest neuroscience and personal development processes to help rewire clients' brains around alcohol and minimize its importance in their lives. We will show you how to powerfully socialize with friends, family, and colleagues, what to say and how to say it so people don't mistakenly think that you're an alcoholic or have a problem, and how to eliminate the temptation of returning to constant drinking so you can finally break the stop-start cycle. To ensure client success, Project 90 can only accept 15 new clients each month. Some of those happy clients include John Keltner from California, who said, "I've lost 10 pounds." Susie Vaughan, a real estate broker in Tennessee, who said, "I've generated 20% more leads." Jessica Gaines-Jarbo from Kentucky, who says, "I've now got joy, focus, presence, and clarity." And Joe Worley from Michigan, who says, "My wife has the real Joe back." If you're an executive, entrepreneur, or investor who's sick of the stop-start cycle and the damaging effects alcohol has on your health, happiness, and family, and you're ready to regain confidence, become more present with your spouse and children, reduce stress, anxiety, and irritability, sleep better, increase focus and productivity, and feel better quickly, you're invited to apply to become a Project 90 client. Applicants can apply for an introductory interview by visiting alcoholfreelifestyle.com/project90. There's a link in the show notes, which you can just click, but that link is alcoholfreelifestyle.com/project90.